What's up guys, this is Winter Alliance and I am back with another video. So today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. So instead of showing off an individual sound or how I mix something, I'm going to be showing you guys a full kind of song overview of how I made my song Lost, which is the most recent song that's out on my SoundCloud right now. And instead of really diving into individual sounds, I'm going to talk more briefly about the kind of creative overview of how I made the sound, how I made the song, and kind of my process behind that, because it's something I think would be kind of interesting. Some people have been asking for it. And then I'll also be covering some of the sounds a little bit more in depth. And if there's a video you'd like me to make or something with one of the individual sounds, like a bass or a lead or something that you want me to dive into, feel free to let me know in the comments or shoot me a message. And I can always kind of simplify some of these patches down, because there's a lot of excess processing that's not necessary to get a lot of these sounds. It's kind of more for mixing stuff that was done a lot later. So a lot of these patches can be simplified quite a bit. So really, in order to understand the creative process of this song, you have to kind of know the background behind it. So whenever I made this, I was kind of vacationing around Europe. I went up through Austria for a while, went up to the Alps, which is where the photo that's now the album artwork was actually taken. And then I went down, took a train down to Venice, and was spending some time there. Now, I kind of wanted to capture that overall feel, basically of the Alps and kind of that, I don't know, sort of landscape feel. Kind of what that image that you see is the album artwork kind of entails, this sort of dark, kind of sinister, but still really pretty and beautiful sort of feel. So that's kind of where my background is with the song. Okay, so now with that in mind, let's go ahead and dive into this. So whenever I produce a song, I tend to produce it pretty linearly. So from like start to finish. So I don't start midway through the song. I tend to start at the very beginning and then just work all the way through. So what this song started off as was this pad sound right here. Now I'm going to play this back, and it's going to be a little bit glitchy because my computer, so I apologize for that. So go ahead and check out the song on my SoundCloud. I'll put an annotation across the screen. I'll also drop a link in the description. So if you haven't already heard it, that'd be a good reference to check out, just in case this is really, really glitchy or something. Okay, so this is the first sound that I made, which was this pad. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little idea of what that sounds like. And it's the second pad that comes in this introduction section. Now for this, I was listening to a lot of Flume at the time, so I wanted to kind of mess around with some chords and kind of make something that was more based in a melodic element rather than just something that's a little bit more ambient. So if we go ahead and look at this patch, there's nothing crazy going on. I got some sidechain, a little bit of 500 hertz being cut out with a soft tube EQ. And then this is an Antidote synth patch, and it's quite simple. I just started with the init patch, went to the digital saw waveform, took this modifier up to 11, which is basically kind of like a high pass filter. It's a little bit different, but that's kind of how it works. Voice count's just at 1, and then I added in another digital saw waveform with the modifier all the way up. That's an octave up, and just put a little bit of that. Then also put a little bit of drift in. Really what gives this pad its character is one, the silent key filter right here, where we have this filter cutoff with the resonant boost. This filter, I kind of talked about it, I think, in the previous video. I can't remember, honestly. But it kind of gives you, it's very similar to the filter in Silent the One. We're kind of a classic analog filter where you can bring up the resonance without actually losing any volume. So that's what really gives the sound its really crisp feel. And then next, I've got some attack with an envelope, about 4.18 milliseconds, some decay, sustain, and release, and that's kind of what gives it this swelling effect. Okay, and then another thing that I did for this synth that kind of gives a little bit more character is I was listening to a lot of Sigur Rós and Yancey songs at the time, and he likes to use a lot of harmoniums in his track, which is kind of like a upright, how do I explain this? Like an upright piano that's combined with an accordion, I guess, is kind of the best way to explain a harmonium. But you do so by kind of pumping air into this like mini piano thing, and it kind of gives you this sort of oscillating volume effect. So to kind of recreate that in the synthesizer, I took the sine wave shape right here, really, really slow sync. It's a 2/1, and then I just assigned it to the oscillator 2 volume. So it brings in this higher oscillator kind of in and out and gives you a little bit of modulation. Then next in, I just added a little bit of equalization. It's basically just a high boost, low boost, mid cut, and then some reverb, and finally some compression. And then here, I've just got the little Audiomatic retro transformer, a little bit of tape saturation, some pretty heavy compression with the soft tube, real attack, super fast attack and release. So it's kind of a general setting that I've been using quite a lot. And then I just had a nice scoop with the equalizer right here just to kind of clean things up. So that's kind of that pad sound out of the way. And after I created that, I kind of wanted another sound to help fill things out. And again, as I said earlier, I was listening to a lot of Sigur Rós and Jónsi at the time, and they used lots of horn sections, and I really wanted something like that. So I just copied these notes over, opened up a combinator, and then I was searching through horn patches, and there's actually a patch, believe it or not, inside the Reason Factory sound bank called Sigur Rós. I think it's in just the brass patches. Look. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just in the brass patches. So if you open this up, what you get is a nice long horn sound. I adjusted some of these envelopes a little bit to kind of help with the swell effect. And then you also have this sort of noise sound that's behind it. And I'll go ahead and play this for you real quick. So you can start to hear at this very end right here, it's kind of this almost wave sound, and that's what's coming out of this. And it was a bit loud, so I just went ahead here and just turned it down. And then, let's see, from there I added some saturation, a little bit EQ, the vocoder, which I did a video on extensively, a couple videos back. And then the maximizer, a little bit equalization, and some sidechain compression. And then the real sort of morphing sound of this comes from a high-pass filter in the mixer, just filtering up as the sound goes, just to kind of bring it out as this sound comes in. And then I just bring it out with the volume as well as this pad's going on. So it kind of creates these morphing pads that sort of blend into one another. So let's see, the next thing that I did was I added in these two vinyl crackle sounds. And it's kind of hard to hear because it's glitching quite a bit. But the way I basically did that is I just took a real simple just crackle sound from like a vinyl noise player. I think it was from a Future Music sample pack. I can't remember. And then I took one of them and panned it pretty hard left, like 60. And then I took the other one and panned it right. And then I either took them out of pitch or I detuned them. Let me check. I think I just adjusted the processing slightly, or I might have just pulled it out of time. Hold on. Yeah, I think what I did was I just added a little bit different EQ curve, and because of the difference, it makes it sound like it's wide rather than just having like a mono signal. So that kind of adds a nice sort of ambience to the track and fills out this chord section that I have right here. So the next thing that I added in was these nice little wave sounds, which sounds like this. And that just has a high-pass filter on it. Let me look over here. So yeah, let's see. It just has a high-pass filter, kind of a mid-cut because it was a bit boomy. And I just cut out some of these high frequencies because they're really not needed for a sound like this. It's just trying to fill out some of this mid-range area. And that's a stereo sample from a sample pack that I got. I'm going to hold on to that one for at least now. Pretty much any stereo wave sound will work. That one I found. It took me forever to find a nice wave sound that I liked. So I'm going to kind of keep that sample pack a secret for now. But this next sound is actually really interesting. So let me go ahead and play this back for you guys. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I bounced it down over here. I'm just going to play this back. All right, so this is that next sound that you see right here. I just bounced this out so I could use it for later projects. Okay, so this sounds actually really interesting. What this is this is a sound that I recorded. So while I was making this song, I was actually in Venice at the time. So I was touring up through Austria, and I took a train down to Venice. And I was in an apartment, which was it was my last day in Venice. I was in an apartment on the Grand Canal. My family found a super sweet deal on a condo there for a few days. So check out Airbnb; they got sweet stuff. Anyway, I was just making this song, and I had the windows open, and there was some sort of boat race going on the entire day. There was a bunch of people going by on gondolas, racing on boats, and like canoes and stuff. A bunch of rowing teams were in for some sort of competition. And while they were going past, a lot of people, the rowing teams were cheering. And they had a drummer in the front to keep rhythm so all the rowers could be on time. So as I was creating this song, I was hearing all these people chanting, and I was like, oh, that would be a really interesting sample. So I decided to just record the next one that came past. So I put my iPhone on the table, the windows were open, I just pressed record, and this was the first sample that I got. So this is actually some people who were riding past on a boat who were chanting. So it kind of gives it this cool sort of tribal feel. So that's kind of the story behind that sample, and that's something that was kind of interesting. And definitely something that I didn't think about adding in, except for the fact that it was kind of like going, I could hear it, through my window coming over the balcony as I was creating this song. So it was kind of interesting found sound, and looking for a lot of different sounds in different places you might not necessarily expect is a really great way to add a sort of dimension to your sound or to your song. It'll create something that's really interesting and also really unique because no one else has a sample because it's something that I recorded just kind of in that moment. So if we look at the processing on this, because this was recorded with an iPhone, it's pretty extensive because iPhone mic is pretty good, but it's not great. So I have a lot of high pass filtering, a little mid cut. I think I've got even more processing on here. Let's see. Yeah, so it's pretty crazy. I got that going on, cutting out those highs, which really isn't necessary because I did that. So I don't know why I did that. A lot of my EQs end up doing this, so that's one thing is whenever you boost something, if you immediately find yourself cutting it, just remove that boost because there's really no reason to do that. Anyway, I got this going on, little mid-cut, some saturation, some limiting because it was really quiet because it was recorded from an iPhone speaker off a balcony that was 20 feet above the water or whatever, and then some compression. Again, that same really fast release and attack. Some more equalization, more saturation. And at this point, it's kind of just to bring up the volume of the sound. And then I run it into the Softube reverb. This is the SAR 1 reverb, I think is this called. This is my favorite reverb by far. The RV7000 is great, but this one sounds really lush and really wide. So it added a very nice ambience to the sound. So kind of without it, it sounds very dull. But with it, it kind of adds this nice stereo sound to it. All right, yeah, so at this point in the day, after I finished this whole chord section and recorded these sort of shouts, I went to lunch at a seafood cafe that was kind of downstairs from where I was staying, and then I kind of came back after that and went back to work. This song actually came together relatively quickly. Usually before this, I spent probably at least minimum 2 weeks on a song, but this pretty much came together in about a day. Which is kind of unusual for my music. I usually spend a lot of time on this, but this just flew together, which was actually really cool and it was super fun. But so what I started doing after this was I wanted to create something that was kind of minimal as my drop. That wasn't necessarily something that was very driving, but was kind of bass heavy at the same time. And really that kind of focused on having a lot of empty sort of negative space in it. So what I started with was this 808 kick sub patch. And if you listen to the song on SoundCloud, it's basically the same patch as my 808 kick sub tutorial that I did, I guess, a couple of tutorials back. The only change that I made was I took this keyboard track knob, which was about here, which wouldn't give you the exact pitch whenever you played it. So if it played a G, it wouldn't play an actual G. It would play something slightly off. And I just brought that all the way up so it'd be in tune. And I did a little EQ cut here in order just because it was a little bit resonant. So what I did was I took that patch and just dropped in a kick drum right here. And hopefully this plays back. So that's the first thing that I did. And then in order to get this kick sound right, which you can hear here, in order to get the right kick sound, what I did was I just size chained this kick to the sub. And whenever I'm looking for drums, the process behind that is, when I spend a lot of time just sort of searching through sample packs and Reason Factory Sound Bank, and I also use the Machine library quite a bit. They've got some really great kick drums and stuff, so I just pull those into Reason. But what I do is I like to kind of get probably about 10 to 15, sometimes even 20 different kick drums that I think will fit in a song. And then I just pair them up with the sub bass or whatever drop I'm working with. And I try them all out. So I try every single one of those kick drums out in context of the song. Because a lot of times if you start with your drums, you have to craft your entire song around how that kick sounds. Because especially with a lot of kick drums. There's so many different styles of kick that not every single one will work out. So you have to really try a bunch out. So I'd recommend trying out at least like 15 kick drums in the context of your song. Just put them all right next to each other. So like put one here, put a different one here, put one here, put one here. Just like kind of cycle it through and just copy the drop section over. And just try it all out and see what sounds the best. That's kind of the best way I would go about selecting drums. It takes a lot of time, but it really ends up paying off. And that's something a lot of producers will recommend, is you take a lot of different time whenever you're looking for kick drums, or just kick drums and just drums in general, to really spend the time, put the work in, and find ones that actually fit with your song. Okay, so another thing that I did here was I just shortened it with this envelope. It was a bit long, and I already had this kick tail from this 808 right here, so I didn't need the rest of this kick. I just want that kind of attack transient. So I just shortened it up with an envelope. And then if we look at the processing, if I remember correctly, it wasn't too much going on. Let's see, I've got some compression going on, pretty heavy ratio, so that's 8:1. Pretty slow attack because I want that transient. Slow release, just again because I just want the kind of snap of the kick drum. Some equalization, making it sound less boomy, so I cut 500. Some saturation. The stereo imager isn't doing anything. And then this is just kind of a weird sidechain split, so kind of ignore that. Let's see, did I go do anything else? No. Okay, so the next thing that I added in, I've kind of got this fill kick right here, which was another one of those like 15 kick drums. This was one of the other ones that I liked, and I still liked it, but I wanted to use it kind of as more of a fill rather than normal kick drum. So this is what it sounds like. And it was kind of this weird, it's almost a metallic sound. If I bring back in the bass that I cut out, it sounds like this. So it's got a reverb on it, high pass filter. It's cutting out all of the bass, so it kind of gives this nice metallic sound whenever this sort of fill section hits. And then let's see, I think it just has a little bit of reverb. Yeah, it's just got a reverb on Ascend up there. That's pretty much it with that. Okay, so the next thing that I did was I went to this bass sound. Now I knew I kind of wanted like a brassy stab sound, so instead of creating it from scratch, I actually went through some of the patches. I used Synapse Audio Antidote again, and I found this brassy bass EX patch, which sounds kind of like this whenever it's on its own. So it's not very exciting, but it was already kind of a stabby sound, which was what I was going for. So if we look at what I changed, all I did was add in a little bit of equalization, the same sort of EQ cut and boost that I did earlier. I increased the reverb, and I'll talk about all this automation here in a minute. Added some compression, and then I just modified the attack envelope of the filter, and also kind of this amp envelope, to really give it that sort of swishy sound that it has. And that's kind of a good creative thing, is you don't always have to create something from scratch to make a kind of unique sound. Is you can really take an existing patch that you kind of like, you can kind of tweak it from there, especially with a lot of these brassy sounds because they're kind of hard to make. So if we look at some of this automation, I've got the voice count automated, the dyad, which is like a kind of like an octaver sort of effect. I think I go up to plus 12. And then also I kind of automate in this noise oscillator. And if we go ahead and look at the drop section, I've got a reverb send on every other bass stab to kind of add a little bit more space. I automate the volume of the white noise oscillator every third bass stab. And then on the second drop, let's see, I automate the voices to kind of go up and then down. And that gives it a nice sort of, here, I'll show you. Kind of gives it this weird bend effect. Let's see, then I also automated to create an octave here. And I also had a pitch bend, the voice, and the octave. And that kind of created it was kind of loud, so I used an envelope right here to kind of pull down the volume a bit so it sounded even. Yeah, you can kind of check that out. So that's kind of what I did there, and that's an interesting way of kind of creating bass fills, is by just automating random stuff that you might not necessarily think of automating, but it ends up making kind of a cool difference and adds a lot of variation rather than just like the same stab on every single downbeat. So if we just roll a quick look at the rest of the processing, we have some saturation for the saturation knob. We have some compression again. We have some vocoding. Just bring that shift knob all the way up. And I guess I didn't really change much here, I don't think. Yeah, so that's what that's doing. That gives a nice crispy sound, cuts out a lot of the low frequencies. Then to get that distortion, I use the tape distortion, which is a combination of compression and yeah, just like a tape saturation. Damage is pretty high. That kind of distorts the reverb. It distorts, the compressed signal and everything. And that gives it this nice fat kind of crunchy sound. Let's see. And then I think I added in, yeah, so I've got one really, really big reverb that automates in. And that's the one that goes every like third or every second one right here. And then on a couple of these buses, I've got even more. Actually, wait, I don't have any more reverb. Never mind. All right, cut to the buses. And then on these buses, I have here some compression, set it to another bus, compressed and EQ'd a little bit more. And a lot of this is kind of unnecessary. I've remade this patch later with a lot less processing, and it's all a little bit cleaner. So that's kind of just personal preference stuff. I think I cut out the sub frequencies as well because I already have that kick drum sort of 808 below it, so I don't want those frequencies to conflict, so I just went ahead and cut it all out. All right, let's go ahead and keep going through this. Let's go ahead and go back to the drop. So after I created that bass stab, I wanted a snare sound, but I didn't want to go with something that was kind of more dancey. I was listening to a lot of kind of, I guess, more like down-tempo drum and bass type stuff. So I was really into like acoustic sounding snares. So I wanted a snare sound, but I didn't necessarily want it to go down on the second and fourth beat as you would normally hear in a dance track. So because of this kind of kick pattern that I had going on, it sounded really interesting to have the snare kind of happen on this. Is it like yeah, it happens like halfway through this measure, but it only comes in like once every 4 bars. And the snare by itself sounds like this. And without any processing on this, it sounds like this. So it sounds pretty thin and pretty weak. So part of what gives it that nice thwack sound is this Modern Studio B reverb preset, which I have halfway up. This is a very kind of tight studio sound, but it sounds very, very fat because of this reverb. Some saturation, a little bit of equalization, just some kind of cuts, and then heavy compression, super fast attack because I just want it to snap, and then some equalization, even more compression for sound shaping, and then I have kind of a nice, I guess that's a pretty small reverb really. Oh no, I just have early reflection. So this is kind of like a, how do I explain early reflections? Here, I'll play it with you out before and after this. So an early reflection is kind of like the first like slap of the delay of the reverb sound that you hear like on the wall, and it just kind of stops there. So you can blend that in usually with a reverb signal, but it sounds really interesting, especially on snares, whenever you just have it with just the early reflection. So that's kind of the story of that snare. And then what else do I got here? I've got a white noise, which is just kind of like a white noise stab sample that's like super long. And I just add some fades in and use it to make some fills, as you can see like right here. Some pretty basic hi-hats, nothing crazy going on. Again, just try out like 20 different hi-hats in your song. And then in this case, I found 2 that I really liked, so I used them both. And then we have this interesting lead sound, which sounds like this. So that lead sound I originally created for a remix that I did a while back. And for that lead, I kind of wanted something that sounded like a raindrop sort of water effect. So what I did was I started off with a sine wave, added a little bit of filter, added a pluck with the filter, added a pluck with the envelope to kind of make a little bit more of a just tighter sound. And then to give it that sort of raindrop effect, I had a very, very, very short envelope decay on a mod envelope, 13.9 milliseconds. And then I assigned that to the pitch. And that sort of creates a sort of a raindrop effect. Sure, I'll just play that for you. So the sine wave already sounds a little bit watery, but with that, it sounds even more kind of plucky. So I added a little bit of chorus after that. And then I added on some vocoding. Yeah, and then I added in this really, really fast delay. That's a 64th note delay. Let me just go ahead and bypass these right here, and I can show you what this sounds like. So it's kind of hard to hear because my computer, but it's like this really, really fast, almost like early reflection reverb type sound that this creates because it's such a fast delay, and there's only a little bit of it. It's only at the dry wet balance of 6. And that just kind of adds a little bit more character to the sound and keeps it from being boring. And then the next thing I did was added in this kind of ambience reverb, which is honestly about as long as the actual sound itself, but it just kind of puts it in this interesting space and almost makes it sound like it was kind of recorded in like a natural environment or something. Then the next thing I did was drop a huge hall reverb on there, some saturation, equalization, some more saturation, more equalization, and some compression really to shape it so I could get a nice pluck sound, which I did with a really, really high ratio. So it's 8:1 or 7.8:1. Fast attack at 30, I guess 0.30. And then a slow release. So that just kind of lets the transient through, but doesn't let the tail of it through. So it just creates a nice like stab sound. All right, now let's see what else we got going on here. So for the breakdown, we'll cover that in a second. Let's start off with, I guess this sound was kind of this was a sample. I just added in, repitched it, and added in like a reverb and a high pass filter. It's kind of this ambient sound. And that's just a sample from somewhere. I have some chimes that are also from a sample pack or something. And those just have a nice little reverb on them and also high pass filter them so they didn't interfere with anything. And then let's move on to this sound. Okay, so this is the kind of watery snare sound that you'll hear inside the breakdown. So for this, I knew that I kind of wanted to switch up the snare. I didn't want to just keep the same drums to kind of keep things interesting, keep them flowy, make it a little bit more beat driven. Because usually for my breakdowns, I just go to kind of like an all out ambient melodics type thing. And for this, I knew I kind of wanted to switch it up and add a little bit more rhythm. So I've got that same wave sample that you saw earlier, but I just took a more like watery section of it. And then I added a reverb to that. And then I added this kind of weird granular sound, which sounds very watery. And then there was this strange kind of bit crushed beat that I chopped up and kind of glitched out. And then when those are all together, they sound like this. So it's a really cool, like watery, sort of granular sounding snare. And that's kind of a really cool sound that I'm actually quite proud of. I just wanted to make kind of a granular sound that was sort of a watery snare. And just by combining some really interesting different samples, you can come up with really interesting percussion sounds that are unique, that are kind of you created, and also they just add an interesting kind of organic sound to your production. And then you also hear in the original song a little bit more glitching, and that's from this extended sample. Just chopped it up and kind of repitched it a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, so I pitched this section up, and I pitched these down. And then I think this is the last thing. This is a sample, which I'll play for you guys. And this is actually from a vinyl record. I think it was something I found at like a thrift shop or something like that. There's tons of processing on this. I made this, man, like I think about like a year ago. Honestly, it's been quite a long time since I made this sound. But without it, it sounds like this. I have a really bad record player, so it sounds like really grainy. So it's very mono, very lo-fi. And then I just added in, there's quite a bit of processing, so I'm just going to run through this real quick. Some equalization, some vocoding, a little bit of stereo width with the Haas effect, some unison, and then I filtered it down to cut out the high frequencies, which is kind of a big part of this to make it sort of a nice ambient pad sound. Added a real big reverb, more vocoding, tube distortion, a crazy amount of EQ, compression, saturation, more EQ, and then for this specific sound, I just added on this Modern Studio B preset of the soft tube reverb with the wet all the way up. So I just added a lot of nice kind of stereo width to the sound. And I do believe that is pretty much all of the sounds. And also on this one, it's like time stretched into an oblivion. I think originally the sample was, only like a 5-second sample, and I turned it into like a 30-second sample. It's kind of an interesting way of processing sounds. So it's really unrecognizable that way, which is nice. Let's see. Yeah, I guess last drop, I kind of have a Vengeance clap here. Nothing crazy. I think that's about everything. Yep, it looks like that's so. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed that. I know that's a little bit different than my normal tutorials, and I had some people kind of requesting a bunch of different little parts of the song, so I figured I'd just try a whole song overview. So if you like that format, feel free to let me know in the comments if you liked it or if you didn't like it, because I can always do more or less of these videos if you guys like them or dislike them. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of this new video format, if it's something you'd like to see more of. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe if you like the video to help me out and also to stay up to date with future videos. I have some more music and also some more exciting projects coming out in the near future, so make sure to stay tuned for those. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment or send me a message, or if you have any questions about like a specific sound or a synth patch or something like that, just feel free to go ahead and let me know. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will see you all next time.